What's up guys, MikeCoco back here, bringing you guys a first impressions on the new hero released, which is Prince Arthur, and it seems to be like a common theme for at least S7 to release like these heroes that are related to the storyline that we don't actually have, so it's kind of weird that we don't have the storyline, but we're given these heroes. But again, he's part of like the what I would say like the royal family kingdom thing, that group of heroes. So he is a sword user, and his stats at 5-star really don't matter because nobody uses 5-star anymore at a competitive level. So you should really be focusing on his legendary stats, and I believe it should be pretty good. I don't have this. I don't know the stats right now, but considering Ritterin has very similar stats to Prince Arthur, I think it shouldn't be too big of a difference. Um, but the more important part to Prince Arthur, or the more interesting part, is his skill. Now, his skill actually doesn't do anything, surprisingly. So if you activate his skill, he will not do anything at all, except for a attack buff and a crit buff for himself for 3 turns. So it costs 200 Fury, and um, because his skill is actually super important to his usage, I'm gonna do most of this impression on the in-game behavior of his skill. So he's standing there looking all freaking buff, holding the sword like that. So when you activate his skill, nothing really happens. The animation happens, and he doesn't attack anyone. And he just applies an attack buff and a crit buff to himself. So it's 100% crit, and it's a 200% attack. And this is for 3 turns for 200 Fury. So at first you might be thinking, if he doesn't have a skill and doesn't really deal skill damage, will his normal attack, even with this buff, will it be enough? And the answer is yes. If you guys don't know, um, generally the hero's skill damage is roughly 1.89 times their normal attack damage, and this was actually a little bit controversial because it seems like the Korean stats were wrong, and some people did some testing in the current global legion, and I'll probably put a link in the description on the forums where people were discussing about it. um, so yes, the skill damage is actually around 189% of normal attack. So the fact that it's 200% means that despite not having actual skill damage, his normal attack will be stronger than most heroes' skill damage at 189%. And the fact that this is a guaranteed crit is almost equivalent to Dread Queen Karina's damage. Obviously, his strength is not going to be anywhere near um, Dread Queen Karina's because her strength is off the charts, but the fact that it is a guaranteed crit and it's a high skill damage, quote unquote skill damage attack, means that you can basically, you don't need Christine or any other exposed weakness, you don't need a crit buffer, and you don't need an attack buffer because he provides all of that in one skill. Now, once you use the skill and the skill is in effect, you can't use the skill anymore. So all you can do is regular attack. And now it deals 158 damage for 3 turns, and or 2 turns actually. Is it 2 turns or 3 turns? Okay, so you saw there he does 26 damage without the buff, and with the buff he deals 158. Now obviously I don't think the relationship is linear, so obviously not going to be doing what was it, 26 and 158. That's almost like 5-6 times. You're not always going to be doing 6 times the damage of your normal damage, but you can see the drastic difference between just using the skill and without the skill. The normal attack is just huge. And of course, a lot of you might be wondering, or if you haven't been wondering, you should think about how will Prince Arthur work in PvP, because now in PvP we have a lot of heroes that have dispel. With the introduction of Jiri, who has the dispel, and Tehu's costume, you're bound to find at least some players with the dispel effect. And if you read his skill description, where is it? It is a buff, and it applies for 3 turns. So if you do get debuffed and Prince Arthur loses his buff, he can still recast it the next turn. And if you saw before, the animation, like if you cast it, you can cast the skill first and then attack. So effectively, if you lose your buff at any time, you can always regain the buff and still deal skill damage, not normal attack damage, because the buff occurs first and then you get to attack. So that means even if the buff is removed every single turn, as long as Prince Arthur is able to reapply a skill, so hint hint, he probably needs um, a white or dream fragment ring, or at least someone around him that can always remove stuns or charms or whatever. If he always has that, then he'll always be dealing pretty high damage. So the fact that the spells don't really work against him is actually kind of cool if you think about it. Now the only flaw that I can think of right now is the fact that um, he doesn't provide any other utility to his skill. All he does is damage. He doesn't provide defense debuff, he doesn't apply attack debuff. Granted, those things are kind of general, but it would be nice to have just so you could replace one of your heroes. Um, for example, if he had like a defense or attack debuff, I could totally see him replacing Janet, um, because his damage is just superior, and with the debuff, he would be almost equivalent. So it's kind of sad that he doesn't have that debuff, but it makes him a very good damage dealer, especially for a sword user um, who also tanks. I think that Prince Arthur would be a very good hero, and if it weren't for his utility, I would probably rate him above Anak or Lucida, because Anak and Lucida both require consistent use of their skill to maintain their buffs, while Prince Arthur only has to use his skill once and it will last for 3 turns. That is the most optimal, or most um, optimal, yeah, a most optimal situation is when he uses his skill and it applies for 3 turns and nobody removes it. Even if it is removed before the, like right after he uses it and it's removed, it still costs 200 fury, but because his skill doesn't require him, or his skill is not probably isn't set to always use every single turn, it means that during the turns where he is already buffed, he doesn't need to use that 200 fury again, so he can just attack with normal attack and draw fury. So it's almost like free skill damage if you think about it. The first turn you need 200 fury, but as long as you can keep up that buff for the next 2 turns, then you can attack with 200% skill damage without using any fury at all, because it's just a normal attack. So it's like that's 400 fury saved rather than using another damage deal like Lucida or Anak. So all in all, I think Prince Arthur is very useful, and I think because of his unique skill, um, there's a lot of ways you can work around and work with his skill to maximize efficiency. For example, the things I talk about with Fury and um, like keeping up his buff, all that stuff, I think it makes him very interesting and also very useful. So you know what? If you have Prince Arthur as legendary, I would definitely say keep him. He's not like Lucas. Lucas, you can throw him in the garbage. Nobody cares. But Prince Arthur, definitely worth keeping and worth trying to get for at least. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Peace. Hey guys, just wanted to add a little bit of insight to Uriel, who is the newest mythic hero to be released alongside with Prince Arthur. And he seems like a very mediocre mythical hero, and the reason is because he doesn't have an attack buff right off the bat. Now I know Gabriel doesn't have an attack buff either. These two heroes both will receive an attack buff via their costume, but when you take a look at their skills, I would say their skill utility is worse. So Uriel's skill utility is worse compared to Gabriel's. So what you get from Uriel is a 3x3 attack debuff and just a lowered fury for yourself, and your next attack is guaranteed critical. Now this last part may probably be changed, as his skill in the Korean version of the game actually deals more damage to bosses. So it deals like increased damage to bosses. So this part may be changed. I'm not sure when, but when you take a look at it, his support ability is literally an attack debuff, while Gabriel, That's Raphael. Where's Gabriel? Gabriel without any attack buff of his own deals magic damage and steals fury and reduces his own fury by 50%. So it makes more sense to have Gabriel act as a support rather than Uriel, because a lot of heroes already have 3x3 attack debuff, and I personally don't think you even need 3x3 attack debuff if you just have a lot of row or column attack debuffers. And the 50% fury consumption is it's almost like useless if you have a Bowmain or any other hero with attack or fury down. And although I will say it's very useful because he is one of the few that has 300 fury, and if you think about it, the fact that his skill requires 300 fury and literally only it provides an attack debuff, and this part of the skill is similar to Anak's for now, it really doesn't seem like Uriel is that good at all. Attack debuff is very common. I don't see why you will need a 3x3, and I just don't see the usefulness in his skill at all. Now, when his skill is changed so that it will deal more damage to bosses, that may change. For example, I think in Mythic Raid that may increase your damage, or what else is there? Maybe Phase Rift. But pretty much as of now, I would say forget about Uriel. Don't worry about him and just skip him until his costume arrives, because there is actually very little point to getting Uriel, because his support is just very weak in comparison to some of the other mythic heroes. For example, Remy is another 300 fury, but she's amazing. She removes debuffs and heals, albeit a little bit, and removes debuffs from the enemy. So it's like Tehu and like Tanui and a little bit of healing. So I think that's a much better support skill. So my final verdict on Uriel: just wait out for his costume, see if his skill description is actually changed. If it's not, then pretty much just forget about him and focus on the other mythic heroes if you don't have them. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Peace.